Hi all, how are you? How's it going? If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. If you are new, welcome. My name is Amira and my channel is all about trying new makeup, talking about new makeup, but also finding new and exciting ways to be inspired by the makeup you already own. If that sounds good to you, I hope you consider subscribing, and if you enjoyed today's video, hitting the like button. Today guys, today's video is a little bit different. I had mentioned this in a get ready with me, I want to say in March or April, where I talked about that I wanted to incorporate some other things into the channel, some other interests, and sort of marry them with the makeup aspect. And so today is that first foray into that, and this is I guess I'm gonna call this series Beauty in the Books, because I want to talk about books. And what I want to do today is I want to rank all of the books I've read so far in 2023. Let's get into it. All right guys, so I've taken my glasses off. I probably should put my contacts in. I don't wear my contacts very often, so I don't really remember ever to put them in. But I'm gonna be reading and doing my makeup at the same time, and I'm like, that was not well thought out. But I think I can manage it. I'm pretty okay with like my phone. I have my list here on my phone. I can like hold it up. But right now, once my glasses are off, my sight is not the best, which is why if you watch my channel you see me doing this or looking off in the viewfinder, it's just that I'm just trying to be able to see. That's the thing. And yeah, so my skincare is done. I just got out the shower about a half hour ago. My hair is still a little wet from me washing my hair. I've done my skincare, so it has a little bit of glow to it, though I feel like my skincare is kind of sinking in now, so it's not as glowy looking as it was. But let's start off with, and I've done my brows, with foundation, and I'm going to be using the RMS Beauty Re-Evolve Natural Finish Foundation in the shade 44. I'm testing this one, and I'm still on the fence about it. I've tried it a couple of ways. I've tried it with a brush, I've tried it with a sponge. I think I preferred with a sponge, and I've been applying my foundation with a dry sponge, and that's kind of been a game changer, guys. So I'm gonna pump some of this onto my hand and we're gonna get started. So let me just give you like a little preamble about the books that I've read this year, and I'm gonna pull up my notes and why I thought to do this, to rank the books that I've read so far. Basically, I used to be a really avid reader, like very avid reader. Like I used to read like 25 books a year easily. Like that was like on the low end, you know, like that was my base number. And then I got older, life got busier, and I just stopped reading. I just didn't have time. And when I did have time, I didn't have the energy. I found myself like falling asleep when I was reading, because you know, like my brain just couldn't focus on the activity of reading, and it kind of really fell off. And then so then I started listening to audiobooks, and that was a game changer for me, because I was able to like read, you know, quote unquote, but I could go about doing things that I need to do, and you know, I would listen to a book while I was commuting, and you know, to and from work, and while I was, you know, grocery shopping and things like that. And it was a game changer for me. And then lockdown happened and I completely fell out of the habit again. And so this year I said to myself, I said, Amira, we need to get back to reading. We need to get back to the things that make us, you know, feel like ourselves. And reading definitely makes me feel like myself, because I've always been such an avid reader and I love books. And you know, I was a writer for a while as well. I haven't really done that in a little bit. I've kind of like put that on the far back burner. It's not something that I'm really like pursuing or looking to pursue at this moment. But yeah, I mean, I've written since I was a little girl. I started reading when I was like 3. Like I've always been like a book girl. So this year is like, okay, Mira, we're gonna read, we're gonna set ourselves like an attainable or realistic goal. Like, don't start off being like, I'm gonna read 30 books. Like, no, you're not, because that's just not realistic to be starting from like 0, you know? So I was like, okay, what can I do? What do I want to, what's realistic for me? And I was like, well, reading a book a month, I think is pretty reasonable. So I said, okay, we're gonna do, I have extra on my hands, so I'm just gonna put it on my face. And I was like, a book a month is reasonable. That's 1 book a month in 12 months. That's 12 books. I can do that. So I started off strong in July, and I was like, I'm going to read. Well, I had a plan, because I was like, well, I want to start off strong by reading a book the first week of January. But I had pre-ordered a book that I was very excited to read, and I wanted to be done with the first book before that book came out. And I managed to do it. I managed to read the first book in like a week. So in January, I read 2 books. And I've been reading an average of 1 to 2 books a month since January. So I'm actually ahead of schedule. I've actually read, counting what I'm reading now, which is the 10th book, I've read 10 books in 5 months, or 4 months and some change. Pretty good, I think. I'm more than I was planning to do. And I'm very proud of myself for that. And I'm going to be putting things on my face. I'm going to try to remember to put everything down below so that you guys can know what I'm using, but I'm not going to be like mentioning every single product every time I use it, because that would slow me down, especially once we get into the ranking. So yeah, so I'm at 10 books as of today when I'm filming this, and or 9.9 something, because I think I have like 1 chapter left in the book that I am currently reading, and that will be my 10th book. So yeah, so I'm like, you know what, let's rank all of these books that I've read. Let's talk about them. I want you guys to know what I've been reading and what my thoughts are on them, especially because I plan on doing a deep dive sort of critique of a series that I started. I've read book 1 and 2, and book 3 is on my to read list. I actually had it from the library, and I wound up sending it back because I wasn't ready to read it yet. I had like another book this book that I'm currently reading, and I was like, I'm not gonna be able to finish both of those in time, and I don't want to stress myself out. So I returned that one. I'll either buy it on Audible, because I do have an Audible membership, but I also get audiobooks from the library, which you can do. So if I want like extra books that month, that's what I can do. So I'm like, well, I won't read that now. I'll read it later, and which I will. But I also I have so much to say about this book series, and we'll get into it once we get into the rankings. So let's start off with the list of books that I have read so far this year. Was The Midnight Library by Matt Hague, and I absolutely loved it. I'm so glad that is the book that I started the year off with, because it was a book that really, for me, reignited the excitement of reading when you really feel sort of transported by reading a book. It just was really, it came to me in a moment in life, like the story and the lesson and the message in the story. Some people might find it a little, I don't know, too on the nose, maybe. I did not. I loved it. If you don't know what the Midnight Library is about, I don't want to spoil it. I will leave links to all of the books that I read in the description box so you guys can read them if you choose to. I don't want to like ruin things here if there are books that you are interested in. So I'm not going to be giving like detailed information about the stories themselves. I'm just going to sort of be giving you my overall opinion on the stories, and you guys can take from that what you will. One of these is a memoir, so it's kind of like, a memoir of a public figure. It's kind of like, you can't really spoil much, I feel like. But the rest of these are fiction books. But that was the first book I read, and I absolutely loved it. It is a story. The synopsis basically is about a woman who has sort of given up on life in a lot of ways. She sort of made choices based on circumstances. And I think this is something we can all relate to, is when you make choices because these are the choices that are given to you based on your circumstances that take you away from the things that you wanted to do. So like, you know, at one point her mother gets sick, so she has to leave school and she never goes back, you know, and the things that she wanted to do and saw herself doing, she's left behind. And in a way, it's sort of created this situation where she doesn't really know who she is anymore. And she doesn't really know what she has to offer because she feels like everything that she would have done, could have done, she's kind of failed at. And if you are of a certain age and you've had like things that you pursued when you were younger and that you gave up for whatever reason, and you kind of like wonder what would have happened if I had, you know, kept up with that particular dream and that particular, you know, path, what would my life look like? And she is given the opportunity to see what the various avenues of her life would have been like. I'm not giving anything away. That's literally in the synopsis of the book. So if you read it, it's basically almost like a Christmas Carol in a lot of ways, but not with like the weird, you know, the weird people traveling with you and making you feel bad about yourself. It's not that. It's but just using that as an analogy is that she's sort of guided to try these different avenues of who she would have been on and to see how she feels about them, which was really cool because she has all, I mean, if I feel like the main character is a Gemini. I'm a Gemini. And she had so many things that she was like, I could have done this and I could have done that. And I would have been great at that. And oh, I really like that too. That's a Gemini, man. We have so many interests and we have so many things we're like, I could be happy doing that. I could be happy doing that. And that's kind of how she was. So she gets to sort of like travel to these different scenarios, you know, life scenarios, and see how she feels about them. And it's really both sad and uplifting in a lot of ways, because I found that I was really, it forces you to sort of look at your own sense of like how you view your life and the choices you've made. And if you're really actually happy with those choices, and if you could change things, should you or would you? So yeah, I just found it very interesting and very like, there are parts of it that really struck me. And as a woman of a certain age who has lived a, you know, a decent amount of life at this point, I could sort of relate to a lot of the things that she was experiencing and thinking and feeling. Yeah, so that one I am ranking number 1 because it was, for me, the book that I felt the most emotional connection to personally while listening to it. So going into the second book I read, well, not the second book I read, going into number 2 on the list. And I'm going to go from number 1 to number 10 because I feel like I want to do it that way, because I want to talk about the books that I love, and then I want to talk about the books that I did love, and don't want to spend as much time on those. And I also just want to, yeah, I want to do it this way because I think it'll be more interesting. But number 2 is a book that I read in, I read that book in March, and I loved it. And it was so interesting because when I was reading the reviews of the audiobook, and the name of the book is Big Girl, Small Town by Michelle Gallen. And it takes place in a fictional town in Ireland, and Northern Ireland. And it is narrated by Nicola Coughlan. Now, if you are a Bridgerton fan, then you know who Nicola Coughlan is. And at the time I didn't know that. I was reading the reviews and people were like, the accents are so thick. I don't understand what they're saying. You know, I just found it really distracting. I would probably like this book more if I had just read it and not listened to it. And I'm sitting there going, oh, their accents, cool. Because I don't have an issue with accents in books. I'm pretty good at understanding like Irish accents, Scottish accents. So that for me wasn't a deterrent. I actually loved the idea of getting like authentic dialects in a, you know, in a story that was an audiobook. And then when I was downloading it, I saw that Nicola Coughlan was the narrator and I was like, what? And she is Irish in real life. She's not English. She's Irish. And she uses her real accent. I think she kind of plays it up a bit as well, but she uses her real accent, her very thick Irish accent in the book narration, which I absolutely loved. I loved hearing all of the like different slang terms, and I loved her. She's an actress, and I think what I loved is you could hear rather, that she was acting instead of just narrating, and it gave so much more emotional depth to the story itself, because the story itself is told in the first person. It's told very situationally. There's not a huge plot, and listening to that book reminded me of why I love books like that, where it's really just a character study and you kind of get to see this person and these people live their lives, and you get to kind of, you know, through their actions, through their daily lives, you get to sort of learn more about them. You get to understand their motivations and why they are the way they are. And what I loved about, what I loved about that book is that the main character, played by Nicola, is very clearly on the spectrum. But when I say very clearly, I mean, after listening to the book and halfway through, less than halfway through, I kind of figured out, I was like, oh, she's on the spectrum. The way she responds to things, the way that she processes other people's emotions, but her own as well. The way that she is sort of looked at by her family, her mother specifically. And what I love is that through her day-to-day life, you know, we learn that, you know, there were things that sort of popped up in her childhood that were she was told were wrong, or things that were off, things that she shouldn't do. Like she has certain tics and things like that she was told, you shouldn't be doing that. You know, you're weird. That's strange. You can't do that. And so as an adult, she's sort of managed life on the spectrum by sort of hiding it in a way. Like she does things, but she goes off, like she has these tics that she does, or these things that are self-soothing mannerisms that she has, that she knows that if she gets seen doing them, she will get in trouble, or people will think a certain thing about her. And so she knows that she kind of goes off into, like, when she's at work, she'll go off and like do them in the corner, or she'll go to the bathroom and do them, or she, you know, will say she has this thing where she calls them her finger flicking. She flicks her fingers when she's like stressed or nervous. And she talks about, like, you know, doing that, or stopping herself, and the control that she has to have to not do it in front of people. And I just found it so fascinating. And that part of the story, it's there, but it's never like a big part of the story. Like, it's sort of, you're driven to figure that out, because she's never been diagnosed. She lives in a small town in Ireland. She's never been diagnosed. She's never had like a situation where there's a sense of understanding about why she is the way she is. They don't understand why she is the way she is, and she's seen as quite strange, but she's also really well liked within the town. Like, she's considered a bit strange, but people really like her. She's well liked, but she's not someone who, enjoys being around people. That part of the story, I love the way it was handled. Like I said, it was something that you as the reader are sort of allowed to sort of come to the conclusion about. It's not something that is never expressly stated in the story. She's never like officially diagnosed. It's just like, I was reading it and I was like, oh, she's on the spectrum. It explains so much about how she views her town, how she views the people in her town, how she views herself. And the story starts with basically the death of her grandmother. And that is sort of weaved throughout the story as she lives her day-to-day life. Her grandmother is murdered. And it's all the talk of the town because things like that, even though they've dealt with like, a situation with like her dad was probably in the IRA and was probably murdered, and he's just sort of like disappeared, and all of that is in the story, but it's not like the main focus of the story, if that makes sense. Like it's not like a political story. It's just everything is up against against the backdrop of those circumstances in that town and like the history of the town. And so her grandmother is murdered by someone in the town, they assume. And the whole story is basically her dealing with the death of her grandmother, but also dealing with the fact that, people are sort of like all in her business, just so to speak, because they're so like, it's a small town, someone's been murdered, and everyone, of course, is like, and her dealing and navigating that and dealing with that and navigating that. And so I found that aspect of it really interesting. And then also the fact that she's a larger woman. That's why it's called Big Girl Small Town. She's a larger woman. And what I loved about the writing is that her size is never treated as like this horrible thing that she has to fix. It's just there. It's just part of who she is. And you understand, like she does talk about going to the doctor and how the doctor made her feel. But she's a character who has romantic connections. Like she's not, I just love that she's giving a full humanity in the book, and that was really striking to me, and I loved that. And I love character studies like that. So that was number 2 for me. Number 3 on the list is the book that I mentioned when I said I was ready to I was trying to get through the Midnight Library because I knew this book was coming out. And that book was Prince Harry's Spare. I was so excited for that book. I had pre-ordered it, and there was a whole hullabaloo with Audible screwing up and like people not getting their downloads. That was a whole thing. Anyway, back to the book itself. I freaking loved it. I loved it. I loved the fact, and I'm so glad that I got the audiobook because I got to listen to him narrate his own story, and I always loved hearing people narrate their own stories because they will bring things to it that someone who's just like narrating won't be able to bring to it. So yeah, so I absolutely loved that book. I loved the stories that he told about his, his memories of the death of his mother. That whole situation was just, I don't know why anyone would leave a child to tell their child their mother's dead and then leave them alone in a dark room for hours by themselves. Let me just say that. But I loved hearing his story in his own words. I liked that he touched on so many things, that misconceptions. I feel like when there isn't a dearth of like a vacuum, there's space for people to fill in their own BS and their own, ideas about how something went down, and hearing how things actually went down was quite enlightening, I have to say. Yeah, I just thought it was a really great book. I liked how honest he was. He didn't really hold back. He was very straightforward about his own issues and, his own trauma, and how the death of his mother left him with PTSD, which I don't see how it wouldn't. I don't see how any child, would come out of that with some kind of, trauma response, especially when you're sort of treated like it never happened, when no one ever comes and has a conversation with you and asks you how you're doing and ever pays attention to how a child would react to that, or how they would handle that. So yeah, that was number 3. I'm a huge history buff, and I've like on my own casually just studied royal history for years and years and years. So I always find it very interesting either way you slice it. But I found him telling his story and just sort of seeing, I think we have this idea, well, at least I do, and you guys can tell me if you have these ideas, that people, especially people who are of a certain tax bracket or whatever, I just thought they would have, that whole institution would have their stuff together way more than they do. Seriously, it's amateur hour over there, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, that was number 3. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. He has a fantastic voice. He has a fantastic voice for narration. As his wife famously said on their podcast, like, he has a podcast voice, and he definitely does. But yeah, love that book. That was number 3. Number 4 on my list is Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman. Alice Hoffman is one of my favorite authors, like hands down, just one of my absolute favorite authors. I adore her work, adore it. If you like stories that have like supernatural elements to them, the thing that I like is that her books are all about, for the most part, about witches and a specific family of witches. But there is a groundedness that they have to them that keeps them from feeling over the top or silly or unrelatable, because these are all still women, who are experiencing all the same things that you experience as a woman in life. They just happen to have supernatural powers, basically. But the powers are very much rooted in, like intention, and are you good or are you bad? Or, it's sort of like, it's not just like abracadabra-y kind of stuff. And if you ever saw the movie Practical Magic, the one with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman, first of all, the movie's not as good as the book. I will say that. But that movie is based on a book by Alice Hoffman, a very famous book. And Magic Lessons is basically a prequel. It basically tells the story of the first Owens witches, the first Owens witch, really. And her story and how the family comes to be who they are, how they get to their house in their small town in Massachusetts. I feel like I've got I'm always getting something in my eye. Oh yeah, hold on. All right, I'm back to get an eyelash out of my eye, but it basically just tells the origins of that family and how, all of their stories are based on the whole point of practical magic in the story is that one of the original Owens witch makes a curse, and she curses the entire lineage. But she does this in a moment of we get to witness the actual curse in Magic Lessons, and I have to say, I was like, girlfriend, why you gotta curse everybody? Just curse yourself. Just put a spell on yourself, sis. Why are you cursing generations of the women in your family because you're mad about something that was, kind of apparent? Basically, she's betrayed by love. It's way deeper than that, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not gonna give too much away. But she casts a spell, and it's this. If you've read any of her books, if you've seen Practical Magic, then you know about the curse. Is basically it curses any man who falls in love with the Owens woman, and any Owens woman who falls in love with a man will not be able to keep that love. Which is ridiculous, right? To curse generations of women because she basically chooses the wrong man herself. Anyway, it starts off with her childhood and how she grows up, and then her daughter and her story, and it basically sets the stage for the all of the books about the Owens witches that come after. Which was cool. It was cool to sort of we've always heard, like if you've read her other books, they always sort of talk around it, and you hear the stories and, oh, you know, Hannah Owens, and she did this, and this is why our family is the way it is, blah, blah, blah. And you really get to sort of like see that in action and how things come to be, which was very nice. I had to take a bite of toast. But number 5 on my list is the story, the book that I was telling you guys that I had a lot of feelings about. And I read number 2, and I'm going to eventually read number 3, but that is A Court of Whirls and Thorns by Sarah J. Maas. I have so many feelings about that book and the series as a whole. Like, I've only read 2 of the books, but I have opinions. Because I plan on doing a deep dive, I'm not going to get too deep into my feelings about the story, but I will say this. I almost stopped reading the first book. I almost stopped reading it. I was talking to my friend. I had a couple of friends when I announced that I was reading it on Instagram. I had a couple of friends who were like, oh, it's so good. Oh, I love it. Oh, it's such a great series, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this book is pissing me off. I'm going to quit it. I'm trying to hold myself to not stopping books and starting books, because there's a book on my list that I did that with, and I'm going to talk about it in a moment. But I was just like, I don't know, y'all. I don't like any of the characters. I don't like the main character. She's driving me insane. I don't get the romance. Like, I don't get it. And my friends are like, my friend Courtney, shout out to you, because she really held me down with that one. She was like, just keep reading. Just keep reading. The second part of the book is so different from the first part. Just keep reading. Just keep reading. And honestly, guys, I'm glad I kept reading, because she was right. The book it's like the second half of that book is completely different from the first half of it. It is a very different atmosphere, story, blah, 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 you know, all of that. But I still have issues with that book, and I still have issues with the second book. And it's one of those things where it's like, I'm compelled to keep reading. Like, the story is compelling enough that I want to keep reading, but I'm still not on board with like almost anybody as a character. There's one character that I was like, I really like him, but then in the second book he was pissing me off, and then I was just like, And it's not Tamlin, guys. I've never liked, if you've read Court of Thorns and Roses, I've never liked Tamlin. I've never liked Tamlin. I'll put it out there. And Feyre, the main character, I find annoying. And I found her less annoying in the second book, but very annoying in the first. So yeah, so that is number 5. Number 6 on my list is a book that I just finished a couple weeks ago called A Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn, and it is part of a series. And I'm putting this at number 6 that I enjoyed the story, but I have an issue with these type of female characters, and it's very similar to the issue that I have with Feyre in A Court of Thorns and Roses series, where they are sort of portrayed as being really brave and bold, and you know, they you know, they're independent women, but then when the chips are down, they kind of do dumb things, and it's just like, and I feel like it's one of the, like, the actions are there to serve the plot, but they don't necessarily match what you've told us about this female character. There was a little bit of that in the book, not as much as there is in A Court of Thorns and Roses, but the issue that I had with it, and maybe it's just because I'm a modern lady, a modern American Black woman, there is a lot that touches on this idea. The story takes place in Britain. It takes place in the English countryside and then in London, and a little bit in Ireland. That the whole idea of colonialism and of colonization, and there's a lot of that in there because these characters deal with artifacts and animals and things like that from, you know, countries that have majority black and brown people. And that's sort of the backdrop of the story, which I'm not gonna lie, rubbed me the wrong way. And that's, you know, for me, it didn't stop me from enjoying the story, but it did kind of leave a taste in my mouth a little bit. Yeah, so I put that at number 6. I think it was a good story, and it is part of a series, and I probably will continue to read the books because I did find the story, like the actual plot, quite compelling. It's actually a really good plot, and it's very clever, and yeah, I think the story itself is actually quite smart and quite good. That aspect of it just kind of made me a little queasy. Number 7 on my list is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Reed Jenkins. Now, if you know who Taylor Reed Jenkins is, she is the author of Daisy Jones and the Six, the book, and then, you know, the show that was just made into a series. The book was just made into a TV series. This is the other book that she wrote. I think she wrote this after Daisy Jones and the Six, I think. I could be wrong. I wanted to love this book. I went into the book wanting to love it. It takes place in old Hollywood. It takes place in modern time. And then the main character, Evelyn Hugo, who is a movie star from like the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. You know, she's like one of those stars that's been like around. She's like an Elizabeth Taylor type, hence the 7 husbands like angle. You can kind of tell that there's like an amalgamation of different old Hollywood movie stars to build this character, which was kind of cool because you could kind of like, as I'm listening to the book, I was like, oh, I know who that's sort of like a nod to this person. Oh, that's like a nod to this person. But basically it takes place in modern times, and Evelyn Hugo is telling her life story because she's getting a book written. She wants a book written about like a biography. So she's talking to a writer who, there's a whole thing about why she chose a specific writer, and it plays into the plot that comes out later in the book. That whole thing, I was like, really? But we'll get to that. So basically it's telling the story of her life and her character's long love, who is not any of the husbands that she has married. It's someone else entirely. And it talks about their relationship. And I hated the character she was in love with. Like, I think it was written with this whole idea that we were supposed to see the person that she loved as just like the polar opposite of her, but they fell in love and opposites attract and all that. When actuality, I just felt like the person she was in love with was a jerk and said it was like verbally abusive and like emotionally manipulative. And also the story, I mean, and I don't know if this is going to ruin it for you guys, but I will tell you this. The story is basically the story of 2 women who fall in love with each other, and they're both movie stars. And one is like a Doris Day type of movie star, and the other one is like a Liz Taylor, but she's blonde. So she's kind of like a amalgamation of like a Liz Taylor, Marilyn Monroe-esque type of character. And their relationship is sort of the unfolding of their romance is told through the backdrop of all of these men that Evelyn has married for various reasons. And so the problem is that Evelyn's true love is not a likable character, like at all, in my opinion, like at all. I absolutely I just disliked her flat out. And I found her to be incredibly, not only like naive, but naive in a toxic way, like in a way of like not actually looking at the reality of their lives or situations. And she was verbally abusive to Evelyn, and she was emotionally manipulative to Evelyn, and I just didn't like her. And so for me, the romance part really bugged me because I just didn't like her. And I was like, you deserve better, Evelyn, than this woman. She's terrible. You know, and the story is sort of told through the backdrop of times changing, and it ends up like towards like the 70s, I believe, 60s, 70s. But it's just, because the whole story is predicated on this forbidden romance, and the other character in the romance is not a likable character, in my opinion, it fell flat for me. And there are also some things that happen in the plot that I'm just like, that's really messed up. And you know, it's supposed to be like we're supposed to dislike Evelyn in some ways, like we're supposed to sort of have mixed feelings about her. And I don't actually have mixed feelings about Evelyn until the very end. Evelyn I actually like. The whole book, I got her. She was a realist. I understood her. I was like, I see you, girl. I see you. I just feel like she's sort of like, she lives her life the way men and live their lives, and she's punished for it, as women often are. So there's that aspect of it. But yeah, there was just, the romance itself is the thing that I felt that was the weakest link, and it was the thing that was the whole entire story hinged on, which is why it's ranked at number 7. Number 8 is Rules for Visiting by Jessica Francis Kane. Now, this book, when I started it, I actually was like, this book is so slow and boring, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish this, because it starts off with her in an airport visiting a friend, and then it goes back to her being at home with her dad. She lives with her father, and she's basically someone who's sort of cut herself off from her friendships and her outside life. And the whole story is based on her visiting all of her closest friends, who she's sort of, you know, former close friends who she's no longer as close to, and trying to rekindle those friendships or see what those friendships look like now that they're all adults. These are all friends that she had in college, and they're all in different places in their lives. And I actually found that quite compelling, but the start of the book is so slow, and it takes place like with her and her dad, and I didn't find that very interesting, and I was just sort of like blah blah blah. The story really gets going once she finally gets to her friends' houses, and she's visiting them each I think she visits the first friend for 4 days, and she's visiting like each friend for a certain amount of days, for an amount of time. And I think at one point she's visiting with a friend for like 2 weeks, something like that. But she visits with each friend, and with each friend, something is revealed about her as a character, you know, her story, because the whole story of her family and like why she lives with her dad and why her brother never visits, and her mother's dead, but how did her mother die? All of those things are very sort of just touched upon in the beginning of the book. And with each visit with each friend, more and more things are sort of revealed about her as a person, her life, but also her friendships, and why these people were friends and why they may not be as close as they were. And if you are a woman of a certain age, you know, in your 30s, 40s, and you understand like you're going through that period of like, you and your friends have all grown up, you've all started your lives, and you still are close, but you're not close. Do you know what I mean? Like, you still have that bond and that connection, but you don't talk on the phone every day. You don't see each other all the time. They may live like somewhere else, you know, in a different city, state, you know, country even, you know, but there's still that connection and that love and that friendship, but you are just not in the same spaces as you used to be. So you can't really relate to each other in that way. And the question is, do those friendships still matter? And do those friendships hold sort of the answer of who you are authentically, outside of like what your life has become because of circumstance? I found that quite compelling. And again, it all happens when she's visiting her friends. I don't find the story, there is a bit of back and forth where she's back home with her dad and all of that. I didn't find any of that as interesting. The things that I found interesting were when she is with her female friends and she's talking to them and they're relating to each other in a completely different way than what they did when they were in college. I found that so fascinating. But I'm placing this at number 8 because I just didn't find half of the story. It does take place in like her home with her dad, and I didn't find that as compelling. Number 9 on my list is the book that I'm currently reading, and I decided to go ahead and rank it because I kind of already know how I feel about it. And that is Just One. What is it? What's it called? Wait. Just One Damn Thing After Another. One Damn Thing After Another, yeah. And it's by Jodi Taylor. And it is the Chronicles of St. Mary's, which I believe is a series as well. I might continue it. This is the book, I said there was a book that I had started and then I just never picked up, and then I picked it up again. So this is the book that I started, and I started this book before lockdown, guys. I started it before lockdown, and I think I got to chapter 11 and then I just stopped. And when I was looking in my library and I was like, well, I'm not going to buy any more books because I have a lot of books that I purchased on Audible and then I just never read because, you know, that's why I wound up canceling my Audible's, you know, membership, because I was just like, I'm using these credits, but I'm not actually reading the books. So I have a lot of books already sort of that I downloaded that I just haven't gotten around reading. This one I got to chapter 11. That's pretty much halfway through the book and I stopped. And I was like, why did I, you know, I didn't remember that I had gotten that far. I knew I had started it, but I didn't realize I had gotten that far. So I started the book again and it opened up at chapter 11 and I was like, why am I on chapter 11? And I took it back to the beginning. And as I'm listening, I'm like, it was all coming back to me now. In the words of, you know, it was all coming back to me. And I was like, okay, I know this book. And then, so I went back and instead of starting at chapter 11 again, I started at chapter 10 just so that I could kind of like get my bearings even more. So now I have, I think, maybe 2 chapters left. And it's one of those books where I'm like, I don't hate it, but I don't think I love it. But I'm also kind of curious about what happens next. But there's a couple of moments, and specifically in the second half of the book, there's a couple of moments that I was just like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is a conversation between the main character and her love interest, the way he speaks to her, and she blames herself for it. And this is a woman who's like very intelligent, very accomplished. And I just wanted to say to her, why are you letting this man talk to you like this? And not only that, keep in mind that I'm just gonna spoil one little thing. He's speaking to her this way an hour after she saves his life. I mean, calling her names, I was like, it's a no for me, dog. It's a no. I was ready to tap. I was like, I'll fight him for you. I'll fight him for you. Send him my way. I'll fight him for you. I was so like, and then it's kind of like glossed over a bit. Like he kind of later on apologizes, but it's not okay. Like would possess you in that moment to make that moment all about you, because it's about a loss that she's experienced and he makes it all about him. And yeah, and I'm just like, and this is written by a woman, and I really wanted to be like, ma'am, let's not perpetuate women being okay with being verbally abused. Let's not make that an okay thing just because he said, I'm sorry. And he says, I'm sorry. And in his apology, once again, makes it all about him. I was just like, no. So he's on my list and he's supposed to be her love interest. And I'm just like, you can do better, man. You can do better. You can do better. I feel like their relationship is a relationship of proximity because they work together. So that's my opinion. And I think she could do better if she were like out in the world. It's neither here nor there. It's a very funny kind of irreverent time travel-y historical society. It's in Britain. This is another issue I have with this book is these people are time travelers who go back in history. And this is part of the synopsis, so I'm not giving anything away. They go back in history to observe historical events, and so they can say this is actually what happened. And then they come back to like present day. And my whole thing is why? Because they're not writing books saying this is what we found. They're a secret society. No one knows that they're doing this. So why? What is the purpose? If you are just historians who go to see something and be like, okay, yeah, that's what happened, and then come back and you don't actually like share the knowledge, correct like historical inaccuracies in history books. Like they're not doing any of that. They're just going around visiting historical events and then like coming back and be like, we did that. And I'm just like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you spend all of this money to time travel only to come back and be like, pocket the knowledge? We know what happened. You won't know what happened. It just didn't make sense to me. That part of the story bugs me. And there's a couple of other things that happen plot wise that I won't spoil that I have a lot of questions about that have not been answered so far. And honestly, with the way the book is going, I don't think they're gonna get answered. But yeah, it's an entertaining little read, but it's not like, hence why it's ranked like, you know, second to last. And now we come to number 10. And number 10, can I just say, is only number 10 because of the last maybe 3 chapters of the book. Literally, the rest of the book, this book, if I could separate those last 3 chapters and take that book at face value for what it is, and just like, it would be ranked at like number 4, number 5, maybe. That is A Court of Mist and Fury, book 2 from the from the Sarah J. Maas series. That book is so completely different energy-wise from the first one in a good way. I love the things that it touches on, and again, I do plan on doing a deep dive. If you guys want to see that, let me know. I really want to do one, but I'm kind of like, I want to make sure that it's something you guys would be interested in, but I probably will do it anyway because I just want to sit down and talk about it. But it touches on some things that were red flags for me in the first book, and it really kind of like fleshes them out. And I'm so glad this is the first book in a long time that I've read where there are multiple male love interests, where the relationship between the two original, like the 2 love interests that we come to know from the first book, their relationship is really sort of looked at and dissected for the hot mess that it is. But I have issues with the final part of the book. I felt like there were some things that happened plot-wise that don't make sense in regards to the characters who she's told us all this time who they are. The choices that they make don't make any sense, and it seems like they were just made those choices to serve the plot. I don't like when writers do that, when you give us this tell of who this person is and then they do the exact opposite of who they are to make the plot move along. I don't like that. I found that some of the things that happened between some of the like plot B characters, it was so trite and so like, again, for the story, but doesn't make any sense. I had issues with a lot of those things. I also did not love the romance aspect of the book. I'm going to get deeper into that, and I know that's going to be controversial because I know a lot of people love the Sarah J. Maas series and they love the character, the male character that I'm talking about, and I do too. I will say that I do too, but there are things that happen that I just feel like were forced. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to do that deep dive, but that is number 10, and it's number 10. I think it's a better story than A Court of Thorns and Roses. I do. I think it's a better story all around. The only reason I'm ranking that one higher for now is because I do like the shift that it takes, but I just think Court of Mist and Fury is a stronger story, but it ruins itself at the end. It ruins itself at the end. It made me so, I got so mad reading listening to the second half of that book, like the final third of it maybe, that I almost stopped reading it. Like I literally was like, why are you I feel like I wasted my time. That's how I felt. I felt betrayed by the writer. You never, as an author, you never want your audience to feel betrayed by you, but I feel like that's how I felt. So yeah, it's number 10 with a caveat, with a giant like asterisk next to it, because yeah. Alright guys, so those are the 10 books I have read so far in 2023. I have ranked them. This ranking may change. Like I'm looking at it now and I might flip Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury and make Court of Mist and Fury 5 and make Court of Thorns and Roses 10. Because I did like the second book so much better. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll flip them. But as of now, that the ranking that I had when I sat down to write my list, that's what I came up with. So I'm telling you that now, but I feel like I'm going to maybe flip those books. You let me know. Have you read any of these books? Have you read the Court of Thorns and Roses series? All of them, or you know, how far along in the series are you? I'm only finished 2 books. I'm eventually going to get into book 3. I think I'm going to get into book 3 after I finish this book that I'm currently reading. Let me know in the comments down below, guys. And also let me know if you enjoyed this little switch up in content where I'm like doing my makeup. I did my makeup quite fast today because I just wasn't doing anything super complicated. So I finished my makeup before I finished the ranking, but that's okay. It's fine. Then we could just chit chat. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Did you enjoy this video? Let me know. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye now.